One of the themes of the Brain Bar is that dangerous ideas are welcome. That's very good, but the question is, are they always welcome in our own minds? Are we prepared for them? And I have to tell you that in my own case, the very dangerous idea of magic internet money was absolutely not welcome. I wasn't interested in the slightest bit. In fact, I had a very big problem. My training in economics had told me that it was impossible. So I ruled it out as something that could never happen. One of the worst intellectual errors of my entire life was made solely because I knew too much. I had read every book on money. I had thought about the subject for years. I wrote my undergraduate thesis on it. I studied it in graduate school. I was a monetary economist, which meant that I was supposed to know more than reality could ever teach me already. So when magic internet money came along, I was the biggest skeptic. And I was looking over in preparation for this talk, I was looking over my perfect audit trail of my own past mistakes and looking through emails I got. So I want to tell you the story of how this happens, which is a very embarrassing story for me in some ways. But as you know, the Genesis block came out in January of 2009. The very world's first cryptocurrency had a value of 0 between then and October 5th of 2009, at which point it had a first posted price of 1/16 of a penny, which, if I had been smart like I thought I was, should have been proof of concept to me that this stuff works. But I wasn't paying that close attention. My recollection of these years is that there wasn't anyone around to explain it to me in a way that I could understand. Everything was written in high-level computer language. So as an economist, I couldn't understand. That was my excuse. I found out just this morning that that is completely wrong, because I found an email just this morning dated February 9th of 2010. And it was from an American who was teaching English in China. And he writes me as follows: all my students here are mining Bitcoin. This is February 9th, 2010. All my students here are mining Bitcoin, which turns out to be valuable. I myself am mining Bitcoin. Every 24 hours, I am earning 200 Bitcoin, right? This is, yeah, amazing. It's amazing. I looked up the price this morning. It's still less than a penny at this point, right? So, and he explains it to me in perfect English. And he says, this is a peer-to-peer currency. It is scarce by the protocol itself. The protocol regulates how many can be created. And the ownership rights over each of these units is determined by a ledger that is distributed, owned by no one in particular, and owned also by everybody. And this ledger keeps perfect track of who owns this metaphor we call Bitcoin. Its value traces to the fact that there is work involved in making it. I think that's wrong, by the way. We can talk about that. But that's what he said. There's a proof of work that goes into mining, derived, he said, from an anti-spam solution called Hashcash, which was developed in 1992, which involves putting a numeric formula in the subject line, which takes CPU power to both create and then also read. This was converted with some other technologies and certain knowledge of monetary economics to create a beautiful monetary system. So he says, I am going to start accepting this in payment for my services in China, because it's a wonderful way for my students to pay me. Now, this is very interesting for me reading this over, because as I say, each Bitcoin was worth less than a penny in those days. So what did I say to this very coherent, very clear, easy to understand explanation? I typed the following thing: "Thank you." And I replied, "That was it." I have absolutely no memory of this exchange. There's just one email among 250 or 300 that I got that day. And I thought, yet another scam, fake, money for the internet. Once again, somebody has fallen for a hoax. And that's where I left it, because I was utterly blind. My theory told me that this could not work. You cannot make magic internet money. This is like alchemy, this is a racket, this is a Ponzi scheme. And you notice that there's many people out there still to this day, even though Bitcoin is, I guess the posted price this morning was something like $7,500. The market capitalization of Bitcoin relative to other cryptocurrencies has gone from 90% down to 35%, because there's literally thousands of these things. There's ever more explanation, ever more iterations of cryptocurrency going on in the world, and it's ever more spectacular. And it's not just about money, it's about smart contracting and law and documentation of ownership rights all over the world. It's a democratic technology that everybody's getting involved in, and it's just tremendously beautiful and amazingly exciting. But on that day, the idea was too dangerous for me to accept. And so on it went, for not just 1 year, but for 2 years, and for yet a 3rd year, I received something like 14 to 15 pieces of communication from very smart people about this, trying to explain this to me, and I refused to look. When in January of 2013, I was surrounded finally by some of the founding generation of cryptocurrency miners and blockchain enthusiasts who forced me into lunch, or basically bribed me into lunch, surrounded me on all sides, and said, "You have to go to lunch." Last thing I wanted to do was go to lunch with a bunch of Bitcoin geeks, all right? But they sat me down and forced me to download a wallet, get this wallet, and they transferred 3 Bitcoin to me, which is payment for my tie, which I figured they were getting a bargain, because I paid $60 for my tie, and they gave me $45 worth of Bitcoin in exchange. So I felt like I did really well. In retrospect, I did extremely well, actually, by that transaction. That was my first time that I really got skin in the game. And then I had the incentive to learn. Now, suddenly, I realized something very, very important, that this was real, and that was something of a crisis. I had to figure out, what is the source of Bitcoin's value? Where does the value come from? And I realized it came from this payment system. And that's an extremely important insight. It comes from the blockchain itself. But at that time, it took me 6 months to discover that. And then it took me another 1.5 years to discover what this payment system is based on, blockchain technology, which is really a distributed ledger, which does the very thing you want distributed ledgers to do. In fact, since ancient Mesopotamia, we've been using ledgers to document ownership rights and create audit trails of who owns what. We have to know these things in order to have peaceful human relations. So there was a time in history when we used clay tablets and stone tablets and wood, and we scratched things, and then we had papyrus, then we had parchment, and then we refined that into vellum for double-entry bookkeeping in the Middle Ages. Then we developed printing, which was the biggest upgrade in documentation ledger technology we had ever had, and with that came a new explosion of prosperity all throughout Europe. And then finally in the 1970s, we developed this glorious thing called a database, which was the most efficient way we had ever had to document our ownership's rights and create ledgers so that we can have more communication between us. And then in 2009, this amazing thing happened with the invention of the blockchain. But you know, it took me, again, 3 years to finally discover this, to understand it, to appreciate. What was my problem? It was blindness created by intellectual arrogance. So for me, this process of discovering was not just a matter of reformulating my theory. What it did for me was gave me a new attitude towards life itself. It gave me an epistemic humility. And made me realize for the very first time, I mean, maybe for the first time, that the most important teacher that we all have is not in the textbooks, it's not in our perfect theories, it's not in our Cartesian models that we've learned in school. It's our ability to be open-minded and look out the window and see what the community is creating and learn and extract information to let the world become our teacher. That was a dramatic transformation for me, the most exciting intellectual adventure. So that was the beginning of my intellectual adventure. And since then, I've become a very big enthusiast for this currency, for explaining to people what it all means. I'm going to give you just a brief description, and actually a defense of myself. Now, in 2010, when somebody said, here's Bitcoin, this is a new money for the internet age, here's your magic internet money, I said, that can't be true. It would be a little bit like in 2010, if you were using a telephone down at the general store, you know, the kind with a little speaker on the wall and the thing you talk into like this, and maybe a hand crank on it, and somebody walked in the store and said, this is my phone, I don't know what you're using, this is my phone, you know. You wouldn't have believed it either, right? That's essentially what cryptocurrency is to our modern monies. We call them modern. But actually, they haven't improved in something like 100 years. Because 100 years ago, we did a terrible thing. We nationalized money. We believed we knew what money was supposed to be, and so we gave every nation just one money. This is your currency. Here is what money is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a store of value, and it's supposed to be a medium of exchange that facilitates commerce with units, and that's it. So let's put governments and big shots in charge of it, and they will have a monopoly. There will be one money in every nation. All the money will go through this one banking system, all approved by an elite group of masters of the universe, and they will release and pool back this money onto the general population as a way of manipulating the macroeconomy to create a perfect human environment. All of this happened in the late 19th century and early part of the 20th century in the name of science, in the name of certainty. We know what money is supposed to be like, and it's really interesting when you reflect back. What did governments of the world do with their new power to create unlimited amounts of this perfect money that they knew it was supposed to look like? What did they do? What was the first big action? They created a beautiful war for Europe and the United States, for the world, the first big total war. So it didn't quite work out. It would not have been possible, that war, without central banking. So here we are 100 years later, and we realize that money has been frozen in time. It's stuck. It never got innovative. It never improved. Everything else is improved. Our communication technology and flight and our ability to extract oil and build gigantic skyscrapers, and there's progress all around us. We can do glorious things nobody even thought of as 20 or 30 years ago, and yet we're still stuck using this ancient technology that we call government money. So what is the great innovation of cryptocurrency? And there's many aspects to this, but I will frame it up just the following way. We used to think that money was a store of value and a unit of count. With cryptocurrency, we discovered a third function that money can actually accomplish. It can have built within the money itself its own settlement layer, its own payment system. That's amazing. So it's like euros and Visa built into one package, or dollars and MasterCard all wrapped into one single token. The payment system comes built into the money. Because I got one email in 2012, because I was getting increasingly angry about people bothering me about this stupid thing, right? And somebody wrote me an explanation of this, how Bitcoin works. And I wrote him back the following note. I said, I think you are confused about the profound difference between a money and a payment system. That's what I told him. What I didn't understand then is that the great innovation of cryptocurrency is to pull these things together. All right. What are the social implications of this technology? I mean, you wonder why people are so opposed to it? I get it. I get it. if the promise of crypto comes true, we're talking about eliminating all the intermediaries that have governed our financial, monetary, and even public lives for the better part of 100 years, including even financial markets. Because what we've discovered in 2017 is cryptocurrency isn't just a money, it's a means of raising capital also. With initial coin offerings, we've seen how anybody with an idea can push that idea out democratically, tokenize that idea, and invite the whole world in to invest in that idea. That's never been possible in the history of humanity. I live in Atlanta, Georgia. It's a very prosperous community, but very interestingly, only 40% of the population does not have access to banks. Why? Maybe their credit is bad, maybe they have uncertain sources of income, they're afraid, they don't want big shots to know about them, they're just suspicious of banks. This is very common in the US. So how are these people going to get by? What are they going to do? Does it mean they don't have a right to engage in commercial activities? I don't think so. And the 40% of Atlanta, but actually 2/3 of the world's population lives outside the official banking system. They don't have access to financial markets. They don't have access to the intermediaries that the first world takes for granted. Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is a solution for them more than anything else. It's a democratic way to extract value and to ennoble people to participate in the great project of building civilization, of offering services to each other and being able to be rewarded for the value that they offer other people without asking permission of anyone, without asking anyone's permission. If you have access to the internet, you have access to a new monetary and financial economy. And what I'm telling you right now is not just speculation. It's happening every single day. The sector is probably capitalized at about $1 trillion today. We're only 9 years in. My friends, this is a brand new experiment. This is fresh. It's new. We're seeing a level of innovation after 100 years of frozen and stuck elites managing our lives through managing and controlling our money. Now we have innovation, and more importantly, we have emancipation, a possibility of democratic inclusion for the whole world. I was in New Zealand 2 years ago, and I saw that there was a helicopter ride available for Bitcoin, and I thought, well, I have those. So I saw what they were charging in Bitcoin. I converted that to dollars. I converted American dollars to New Zealand dollars and converted New Zealand dollars back into Bitcoin. And then I felt like a complete idiot. I realized I didn't have to do any of this stuff. Bitcoin is a currency for the whole world. You know, you don't have to go through these conversions. The level of efficiency gains of this are absolutely extraordinary. Because, you know, as a peer-to-peer currency, something that enables the transfer of value from any one person to any other person in the entire world, without censorship, no one to say yes and no. Anyone can get involved. It's just math. In other words, it lives in the realm of ideas. That is emancipatory. That is human liberation. And I'm sure I'll get the question, yes, but won't governments get rid of it? Well, they will try, you know. We could get a government official to walk into this room right now and tell you, do not think about elephants. But you will probably begin to think about elephants in total defiance. It's exactly the same way with cryptocurrency. Governments have a lot of power in this world, they do. But they can't take away, they can't actually interrupt and abolish the realm that lives outside of the physical world. Government jurisdictions live within nation states and they control physical property. But you get a technology like Bitcoin that lives in the realm of ideas on a distributed ledger that can be owned by anybody in the world, that becomes impossible to suppress because there's no central point of failure. My friends, I've given you a very big crash course in a glorious technology that's going to profoundly affect every aspect of our lives, from the way we raise money to the way we save money, the way we hand on wealth to our children, to the people we engage with, to the values we can create with other people, and to the structure of our relationship to financial intermediaries and even the state itself. I welcome you. I invite you to consider this extremely dangerous idea, to not make the same mistake I made, to learn from the world around you, become a stakeholder, mine Bitcoin, own cryptocurrency. Welcome to our new world. We have choice. We have freedom. Thank you very much.
For me, it seems like a country's identity is quite tied up in their currency, like the dollar for America, the euro for Europe, the forint, the Hungarian forint. Does a country not lose its identity a little bit if it loses total currency?
Well, that's an interesting question. You know, it wasn't true in the past. In the early 19th century in the United States, most of the coinage that circulated in the United States was foreign. We're just not used to that world. You know, there was a time when choice in currency was very natural. And I think we're headed to that world now.
Okay, excellent. So we're going to have our first turning point. Okay.
You talked a lot about the decentralizing nature of cryptocurrency. And what I see now is actually a way away from this.
One of the things I noticed in 2014 was that there's a weird conservatism associated with the developers of Bitcoin, which I totally understand. If you invented and guarded history's first magic internet money, you know, you get a little conservative about the protocol. But what happened was, in 2016, 2017, there was a big debate. What are we going to do about scaling? It became very popular and in many ways kind of centralized. But there was a wonderful, beautiful, magnificent, thrilling fork in August of 2017. I celebrated that day because it meant that even Bitcoin Core would have a competition in the creation of Bitcoin Cash. And now there's so many new currencies. So
and Jeffrey,
thank you.
Turn.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
My question would be a general criticism, actually. Many argue that because there aren't central banks behind cryptocurrencies, their exchange rate fluctuates really heavily, and it's rather like a risky investment than a money that has a specific interest in the interests of a particular region like the European Union or Hungary as a specific country.
I don't have a problem with the fluctuations because it is so new. We're still trying to find the valuation, you know. And generally over time, cryptocurrency has risen in value rather than fallen. Although it's also true that many speculative assets in the space have disappeared. But I don't know, to me the volatility is as volatile as life itself. You know, I think stability is fake. That's my view.
You didn't talk about the problems of Bitcoin. Everyone says that mining Bitcoin is not sustainable. It uses lots of energy. What do you think about this?
Well, I don't think the use of energy is bad. I like the proof-of-work protocols because it's very much like gold mining. I mean, also mining gold took energy. You don't have to dig for it. You know, money shouldn't be free. Like, you shouldn't be able to print unlimited quantities of it, for example. This is where I think governments went wrong. So the proof-of-work algorithm is a good thing. It's a great innovation. But, you know, there might be other ways. There's a proof-of-stake. Hashgraph is experimenting with new ways to establish access to blockchains, and I would be all for that. In the meantime, I think all these complaints about the cost of mining are a little bit silly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
As you see, I'm an Asian face. I come from China, which is the largest proportion of the investors. Actually, for the blockchain digital assets, I'm not a miner, but I'm an investor. In the middle of December, I invest some money.
Oh yeah, you bought
it is
at the
pretty
top.
good, but
Yeah.
after that, it will be a big shock after January. So, what is your investment suggestions for all those digital assets?
My first article I wrote, it was at $30, and many people, and then it went up to $132, and many people bought because they read my article. I was not telling people to invest, and then it fell back again, I think maybe to $19, and you know what, they accused me of a pump and dump. They blamed me, you know? But if they had just stop paying attention to the price and look to the long term, all those people would be very rich today. So I think that's the right way. This is fun.
So you mentioned that a lot of people on Earth basically have no access to banks.
Yes.
And they just don't have it in their vicinity. So I'm going to contradict that in a sense that a lot of people have no access to the internet. Over half of the world has no access to the internet. 10% of Africa has access to the internet. So would you say that cryptocurrencies are more suitable for the Western world and that they're still a little bit discriminatory?
I wouldn't say so. You know, actually, I don't think that the developed world is the natural place for adoption for crypto at this point. I mean, I know in Venezuela, there's a token called Fast Cash. It's really very, very popular. In my office, and I run the Atlanta Bitcoin Embassy, we have the ability to stick in your paycheck and convert it to crypto and send it to anyone else in the world for free, if they have access to the internet. There's a lot more people who have access to the internet than have banks, and so that's the relevant thing. You look at the trajectory of access to the internet. I hope that everyone in the world will. And by the way, it's possible to own and hold crypto without being online. Paper wallets.
What if governments simply not accept cryptocurrencies as a paying method, as a currency? So what would government do if simply says this currency is not acceptable?
Well, in that, if government said in our realm no one may use Bitcoin or any cryptocurrencies, I think that's a sure way to create the world's largest black market for cryptocurrency. That's what I think. Hello.
Good morning, Jeffrey.
Hello.
Simple question.
Yes.
What are the risks and how do we mitigate the risks of cryptocurrencies being used for money laundering and other nefarious activities?
It will be used for money laundering and other nefarious activities because nefarious activities are just part of human nature. At this point, they are a tiny problem relative to fiat currency itself. That is the preferred means of money laundering and funding of terrorism and every horrible thing in the world. I mean, so actually cryptocurrency has built within it the capacity to have an audit trail. So you can actually see where the money is going. So it's actually, even from a law enforcement point of view, has certain advantages that paper currency doesn't. So lawbreakers actually prefer government currency to crypto, even now.
What will prevent Bitcoin to be owned by the elites? If I'm a rich guy, I can buy 90% of it and just not release it to the market.
Yeah, I don't believe that will happen, but let's say it does. The beautiful thing about crypto is that you can create infinite numbers of different currencies. So if you've got a monopoly on one, you just make more. It's a new world of choice, and that's what's glorious. It's called a free market for the first time in our lifetimes.
Great, thank you. Jeffrey, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.